Hello, it's the culture genie. The moon is beautiful, and in many cultures it is an important symbol. In Indo-European traditions, the moon is a feminine symbol, and the gods associated with the moon are women. Howdy there! Except in the Germanic traditions, where the god Mani is a manly man, and I am the man in the moon, a Germanic folktale tradition that descends from Mani. Yes, you are, but otherwise you function just as the female deities. Now disappear like the moon. You crazy lunatic. Yes, I will. Just like your sanity. Anyway, in Indo-European traditions, the moon is usually representing the rhythm of time as it embodies the cycle. The phases of the moon symbolize creativity and enlightenment, and luck in its more positive connotations. But the moon can also represent the dark side of nature herself, in the form of chaos and insanity, and often a shifting between these two states of creativity and madness. You can see this influence about the thought of the moon being a representation of change in ideas about tarot cards, the moon being associated with change and life transitions, and often chaos. This is a tradition taken from older Indo-European ideas about the moon being a representation of change and chaos, in contrast to the male sun that represents order and stability. However, not every tradition has the moon as a symbol of chaos, or even change. In fact, in older Semitic religion, in the old Semitic pagan religions, and in the newer Abrahamic religions, the moon is associated with time and order, permanence, in an ever-reoccurring cycle. A male protector in comparison to the female sun that is chaos. It should also be noted that the words for moon in both Hebrew and Arabic are male nouns, and the words for sun are female nouns. So this association with the genders is present also in the later cultures. But let's get back to the old pagan traditions. The moon in the older Semitic traditions is also associated with fertility. For example, the moon god Su'en or Sin in Akkadian traditions, and Baal Malkart in Canaanite religion, and many others, were heavily associated with fertility in harvests and seasons, as the moon and its changes were connected to the coming of seasons, and with them the seeding and the harvests of crops. Another association to fertility for both the moon god of Sin and Baal Malkart may come from both of these moon gods' connection to cattle, and also perhaps from a clear link to certain other cycles, which this video will not discuss, but are roughly similar to the timing of the moon's transformations. The connection with fertility and cattle is seen in early Babylonian texts from the 2nd millennium before Christ, in various birth incantations. For example, the magical medicinal text known as A Cow of Sin relates the story of the moon god's beautiful and pregnant cow, Gemesine, and the birthing pains of Gemesine are eased by Sin, and the incantation ends with a supplication or prayer to the god that follows as, "May this woman give birth as easily as Gemesine," Gemesine being the cow of Sin, suggesting this text's role in human childbirth prayers and fertility. Whereas in Indo-European traditions, the sun stands for order and permanence, and ultimately life. In Semitic pagan traditions, the sun stood for the opposite. It stood for chaos, decay and disease and destruction, and ultimately for death. For example, the sun god Nergal Shamesh was both the god and goddess At the same time, the sun of disease and of the underworld and the dead and of death generally in ancient pagan Semitic traditions. Nergal's sun aspect, that was the feminine aspect, the destructive aspect of the god. Whereas Sin was a god or goddess in certain fertility contexts. That was a god of permanence, of recurring seasons, of order, and of creation in life. Actually, this idea about the sun being chaotic and unorderly and female, and the moon being a representation of order and recurring seasons actually lived on in later religions. As the months in the Islamic and Jewish calendar are based upon the moon, and the moon is viewed as an instrument of God's will to give humanity awareness about when certain things should be done, when certain holidays or certain observations of rituals are to be held in both Judaism and Islam. For example, Jews are supposed to perform Kiddush Levana, or a special prayer each new moon cycle, sanctifying the new month. And the crescent of the new moon signifies the beginning and end of the fasting during the month of Ramadan within Islam. Thus, the moon becomes an object of order for the believer, and thus a symbol of order for the believers in both Judaism and in Islam. A lesser known aspect is that the crescent moon is actually a symbol that is very much used in Jewish Kabbalah or Jewish mysticism to represent God's divine order, and considering the importance the lunar cycles have for determining various important events throughout the Islamic year, it should thus come as no surprise that the crescent, and especially the crescent with a star within it, has been adopted almost as an unofficial symbol for Islam. The star being within the crescent is impossible and never happens in real life. As the moon is still there, it is just darkened due to not getting light from the sun, and it thus hinders any light from any other stars to reach the earth, and thus represents a miracle, and the miracle being the divine revelation of the Quran. However, what might not be known is that this symbolism of using a crescent or a crescent with a star inside of it was actually not that common in the early days of Islam, and only became popular with the rise of the Turkish Ottomans in the 15th to 16th century. And the crescent with the star is a far older symbol than Islam, as even back in the day of the old Mesopotamian gods it was used as a symbol to symbolize divine protection and favor. And it was also used by the ancient Greek Macedonians during the time of Alexander the Great, as the crescent moon was a symbol for the goddess of the hunt, Artemis, and luck in both the hunt and in war, going back to the fickle nature of the moon as a symbol for change in Indo-European traditions. And what is luck if not a fickle change for the better, or the result of ingenuity and creativity in dire situations? Let's go back to the origins of the Islamic crescent with the star. Strictly speaking, it is not an official symbol of Islam, as there does not exist any precedence for its use in the sources or association with any important Islamic person that used it, thus setting a precedent for using it. And the probable origin of this symbol is probably the Ottoman Empire, as they adopted it from the Byzantine Roman Empire, as the crescent moon was a symbol used by the Roman Empire. Though again, some earlier examples of using crescent moons do exist in early Arabic Islamic history. However, back to the Romans and their use of the crescent moon. A blood red moon or a crescent moon with a star on a blood red background was a symbol for death and bloodshed in Roman times and was considered a good omen from the god Mars and the goddess Victoria. Yes, good omen, as it meant the death of the enemy and even in its normal form, a symbol of war. And Luna, that's say both the goddess and the moon itself, who was associated with both war and victory, and thus interconnected with these gods. Hence, the moon's use as a symbol for war in Roman times. And you can also see this use of the moon as a symbol for war on a lot of crests belonging to various noble families in Europe. But the moon was also associated with madness. This is why we have the word lunacy, craziness, from the Latin word for moon, luna, something which was also strengthened by the church, as the moon soon became associated with pagan rituals and views of paganism after the conversion of most of Europe to Christianity. And this view of the moon being both connected to madness and to paganism is also one of the possible reasons as to why in popular folklore werewolves are associated with the full moon. Remember, the wolf was an important symbol for Rome as the mother of Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. And the moon was associated with paganism and the ideas of worshipping nature spirits and animals. So the concept of the werewolf could possibly be seen as a sort of extension of condemning older pagan traditions and making them something dangerous, though this is a result of more decentralized efforts by common people rather than as a result of church policy. This is in addition to the werewolf being connected to change and the changing nature of the moon, and the moon also being connected to bloodshed and insanity. Anyway, the symbolism of the moon is vast, ranging from to being a representation of time and cycles and seasons, which are interpreted as representing change, creativity, insanity, to order, protection, stability, and fertility, and war, and luck, and victory in war, to being viewed as a symbol representing faith in the power of the one true God and his order, to representing paganism and its polytheism. The symbolism of the moon is vast, and this is but a mere sampling of what is associated with the moon across all the world's cultures. And here I have a question for you, my viewers. Do you think I missed something? Please tell me in the comments if you think so. Or if you knew any example of moon symbolism that you think is interesting to discuss. And also, if you have any questions about these things that I've mentioned, then please post them as well, as I love interacting with you. Please do subscribe, as it would help the channel spread awareness about the humanities. اشترك بالقناة من فضلكم.